Hi, I'm Dave Rupert, and today we're talking about log jams. And the story starts here. One day I was working my job, and hundreds of emails started showing up in my inbox, 313 to be exact. I thought it was a glitch at first. The email client was blurping notifications at me, and I thought, oh, certainly this is a glitch. But no, I was really being assigned 313 accessibility tickets. And I finally summoned the courage to message the Scrum Master that I didn't like too much, but hey, that's besides the point. But and their response was, oh, I thought you already knew about this. Ooh, that triggered my fight or flight response. The fight side of my brain is saying, oh, you love accessibility. Like, you started the accessibility project. Hey, this is something you can do. This is a great opportunity to make a big impact for millions of people, that millions of people use on a daily basis. But the flight side of my brain was saying, this is a trap. This is terrible. This is tedious work that no one actually wants to do, and they're putting it on you. You need to get out. And the flight side of my brain wasn't exactly wrong. Some simple math told me, 313 issues at about, 5 issue per sprint clip. That's not a lot, but, getting through QA and everything, 63 sprints. The next 63 sprints of my life, or 2+ years, would be dedicated to clearing out this backlog. That's a lot of stuff. And especially like when the entropy of the organization was maybe not, it was maybe towards creating more accessibility issues. You sort of start to see like, oh, my work would be undone by the time I finish. It felt like this, right? I felt like I was just standing in a sea of logs that were stuck in a river. It was my job to unjam this log jam. We had created a logjam. I mean, I didn't. I don't write bad code, but in theory, I could have shipped code that was potentially inaccessible. But as an organization at large, we had created quite a mess. So let's take a step back and make sure we're all on this page, or give it a little history of log jams. But logging is from pre-industrial days, but I think loggers eventually figured out, hey, I can go upstream, chop down a log, roll it into the river, use the river to push it downstream, and then get the log out down there and chop it up however we need. We didn't need trucks or steamships or ox carts or anything like that. You just use the river as the machine to move things down. It's part of the process, but it's pretty green technology to use the river, but the chopping trees part might be less green, And it works pretty well, and you can actually put quite a few things down the river. It works just fine. But the problem occurs when you send too much product down the stream. And on this situation, you put too many logs in the system, and they start bumping up against each other and going cattywampus. And then when you hit a constraint, right? When you hit a constraint, whether that's a shallow sandbar or a rock or commonly a bend in the river, or any kind of bottleneck really, that's when they start piling up and turn into this jammed up mess. And in business parlance, this sort of echoes the theory of constraints, where you have inventory that goes through the system as an operational expense and then is turned into throughput. The theory of constraints is from this book by Eli Goldratt called The Goal. This would be one book. I say don't judge a book by its cover, because the cover is hideous. And I would also extend that to don't judge the book by the narrative format inside the book, because narrative formats for business books tend to be kind of bad. But this was actually ends up pretty good. And if you hate the cover this much, I could actually recommend, there's a graphic novel version that you might be interested in. There's also this book called The Phoenix Project, which is kind of modern day adaptation of the same theory of constraints, these principles, but specifically for IT and DevOps and things of that nature. This is the work we do day to day. And to be honest, it was a very cathartic read, so I'd recommend it. But getting back to kind of the theory of constraints, right? You have inventory, right? The inventory, you pay for inventory in some capacity. You paid people to chop down logs. You bought land for the forest. You pay for inventory. And inventory floats down the river and then is changed by some operational expense into throughput, which is the thing you sell. And that operational expense could be, milling or paying the mill workers or buying saws or something. I don't know how milling works, but it could be some sort of operation. But even the time on the river is an operational expense because time is money, right? If the logs get jammed up and take 10 weeks to unblock, well, that's a operational expense that you incur. So the whole thing about the theory of constraints is you have to solve the constraints, and your throughput is actually measured by the capacity of your bottleneck. So you kind of look for these bottlenecks, these constraints, and you kind of optimize your business around getting through those. And that can be a person. Sometimes it's a person can only do so much, or a manager can only sign off on so many things. Sometimes it's a machine. The PX90 machine can only cook 10 widgets a month or whatever. It could be a machine as well. But you have to think about your whole system in a system of constraints. And I sometimes do. I think about this in the kind of grander scheme of our work. It's very similar to like a bug's life. The bug exists in some capacity, known or unknown, but the bug is then discovered and documented, and then the bug is then triaged. And this moment of triage is kind of the moment I want to focus on, where it's turned into something that people can work, or it's assigned to work, and then work is performed, and then the bug is then fixed. So, but I feel like there's a constraint there. That's like where things kind of start breaking down. And if you have too much inventory in the system, you can have a collision. You can have a backlog, where if dates start slipping or something on a bottleneck further up the stream, this starts getting more and more complex and jammed up, and the whole system kind of comes to a halt. But you might be saying, oh, I know the answer. This is no backlogs, the no popular no backlogs movement. And I would agree with you from a theory of constraints standpoint. You shouldn't create more work than the system can actually turn out and turn into throughput. And there's also some interesting discussions like, it's cheap to produce bugs, but expensive to fix them. It's cheap to invent features, but expensive to build features. But it's not always feasible for everyone to just go home from their jobs today and delete their entire backlog. I'm not even proposing that. You can't do that. I couldn't do that. I was in the position where I needed to undo the backlog. Right. That was my job. So this is it. How do we eat the proverbial elephant? It's an old question, I guess, in conventional wisdom is one bite at a time. Might as well just get started, get going. But me, I don't know. I've never eaten an elephant before. So my perspective is I'd maybe want to know a little bit more about what's delicious. Is there bacon inside of an elephant? I don't know. Is it easy? Are there easier parts and more delicious parts that I could maybe start with and maybe get excited about this project? Is there a way for me to wade into this pool, or do I have to just start from the nose and go to the tail? I would like to know a bit more. And I think to know a bit more, it's important to understand how accessibility audits are performed. Maybe you have another kind of audit, or maybe you just have a backlog of junk. Whatever your situation, but here's how accessibility audits are kind of performed. They're often done screen by screen, button by button, requirement by requirement, browser by browser, platform by platform, etc., etc., etc. This work is done by experts, and I have one example where there are 90 issues found on one single page, 33 different WCAG success criteria violations, 8 different assistive technology platforms were tested, screen readers, high contrast mode, Android, iOS, 8 different platforms were tested. It's kind of grueling work, QA work in some ways, but it's really just, again, I don't want to change this part. I'm really way more interested in that handoff process or when things are converted into actual work. And one thing about the accessibility audits is they're often they're often focused on the output, but ignorant. And I mean that in the most like gentle sense of the word, but ignorant of the input, There's the output, which screen readers read, braille readers read, assistive technology interacts with. That's really what matters to an accessibility audit. But it's ignorant of the thing I write, which is the input. I write the code that builds the output. And if I just had a one-to-one mapping between the input and the output, that would be easy. But no, I actually operate on like dozens of files to produce one file, right? And because I operate on dozens of files, like object-oriented programming or design systems, often the issues are very repetitive in an accessibility audit because of how we reuse our code. Because if you find an issue on this page, well, guess what? It's going to show up on the next 4 pages, the next 10 pages, the next 15 pages, because it should. Because by design, it's using the same code. We try to not repeat ourselves. So those fixes should cascade too. But anyway, this kind of gets into the next issue is accessibility audits are often ignorant of what's easy versus hard in the underlying system. Take these 2 pages. What's the difference between these 2 pages? Does anyone know? Anyone? Oh, well, it's of course because one is on the production database with a high effort to change. It's user data, product data, all kinds of data mixed into this. And so like if I have to add a field to the database to fix this accessibility problem, that's a big project. But if it's on the static side of a static page or a static template, man, that's an easy fix. That's a low effort. And accessibility audits are often ignorant of the page metrics, like the metrics or relative importance of the page. What's the difference between these pages? Anyone? Well, one gets 1 million views a day, and that's very high impact, and the other one gets 5,000 views a day, and relative, it's low impact. We experienced this. We had 2 issues. We actually had 40 alt text issues or something, but alt text is missing on these 2 pages. What's the difference between these pages? Well, as I said before, one's for the production database. It takes 1 million views, very high impact. So if we fixed it, it would go out to a lot of people instantly, but it would take weeks to fix this. The static site, not many people are going to see it in a month or a year or whatever, but it would only take minutes to fix. And I could fix 100 of these issues before I even fix a database issue. So that's another dynamic that is missing from like just a list of issues. The context really matters. And so how do you eat the proverbial elephant? I think the context matters. And we were struggling with digestive issues. We just had a chronological list of tickets from how they went. The offshore team that did the audit went through the whole entire site. So we just had a chronological list of problems based on when people audited it. That wasn't helpful, or it's maybe helpful if I were taking it page by page, but it's not that helpful in the grander scheme of things. And the offshore team had labeled the issues high, medium, and low, which turned out to be radically incorrect. But that's besides the point. The larger problem was we had no context of how they were ranked as high, medium, and low. The context there was totally missing. It's high priority, so therefore it's the highest, do that one. But that doesn't reflect how we built the site either. So I kind of was just frustrated or just like, how do people do this was sort of the question. And I was thankful to find this article by Steve Klabnik, or I remembered this article, How to Be an Open Source Gardener. Steve was working on the Rails project in 2012, but he works on Rust now, I believe. But Rails project, back in the day, Rails was a popular project, but its backlog had grown to 800 issues. And there were 20 or 25 new issues, 24 issues showing up every day. Whoa. So Steve decided to pitch in and help out and eat the elephant. He started by reading all 800 issues. He just opened it in a new tab, read top to bottom, closed the tab. Wow, that's dedication. Took 2 days. And then from there, Steve had an understanding of all the problems that Rails was kind of facing. He kind of had a mental map of how it worked. And so do you know what he did? Did he start fixing code? No. He did it again. He read through all the issues again. And then that second time through, he had a lot more context for what was going on. he was able to see like duplicate issues. Oh, that's a duplicate of this other one. He was able to kind of understand, oh, that's a feature request. That should actually go to a different avenue entirely. Or, oh, that's a request for help. We actually do that different. That's over on Stack Overflow. Or, oh, is this an older version of Rails? Maybe we could see if it was fixed in a later one. And can we repro it? Okay, if we can't reproduce the bug, maybe it's fixed. And can we, or if there are no reproduction steps, we have to just say no or give us those because we just can't fix it. And if we can reproduce it, can we reproduce it against the latest version? Because if you can reproduce it against the latest version, then it's still an existing bug. Otherwise, it's been fixed. So that's good information to have. And so that's what I started to do. I started to read through all of our issues, top to bottom, read them all through, tried to figure out what was going on. And I started making those connections, started seeing those things. Oh, this is a duplicate of that, or very similar and probably could be fixed in a similar manner. I started like kind of piecing that together. And then I also kind of like also noticed there were some issues for pages that don't even exist anymore. So how? But whatever, those mysteries were contained in the backlog. So I had to figure out how I was going to deal with that. But I was sort of struggling with JIRA as kind of hitting the limitation. And that JIRA is good software, like it gets the job done for a lot of companies. But if you have, from a Kanban perspective, you have 300 and something issues and 313 issues in the to-do column, it is not very helpful, right? Because you end up having to like click in to get more information to each one, and then you drag the card, and hopefully that was the same card, but it was poorly named or whatever. But besides the point of like operational ops problems, it just was kind of tedious to do that 300 times in a row, and kind of you felt like you were losing your place. Or is one sort of a situation where the board version or the list version had not enough information, and the detail view had too much information. So we almost needed like a Goldilocks sort of level of kind of exactness. And honestly, it was easier to do it in Excel. We pulled all the issues, we exported from JIRA, the query, and put it into Excel. And, let's say these 5 issues: project 1, 2, 3, missing an alt attribute; project 1, 2, 4, focus not visible on hamburger menu; 1, 2, 5, page missing alt attribute. That sounds like 1, 2, 3, but the title's like different. Okay, cool. 1, 2, 6, missing contrast 3 to 1 on search. Okay, project 1, 2, 7, focus not visible on checkout. The checkout one's interesting because checkout's kind of a sensitive page. That's the moneymaker. So if we change checkout, people kind of notice or are very concerned when we're messing with that page. So wouldn't it be helpful if we had just a bit more data, a bit more metadata, right? What if we knew which page was affected? And look at this. We have, the first one's for the missing alt attribute on the about page. Oh, the about page is not a very important page, but it's a high priority. Okay, we could probably adjust the priority there. The focus is not visible on the hamburger menu. Well, that's on every page. The page is missing an alt attribute. That's for the features page. That is the database. If the database has an alt, or like an alt text thing on images, then we should be okay. But if it doesn't, then that's kind of a lot of work. Missing 3 to 1 contrast on search. Ooh, that's going to be, that's a lot of, that's probably a global change, might be a lot of work to roll out, but focus visible on checkout, sensitive page. But what if we don't really build page by page, right? I already said that we don't build page by page, we build component by component. So what if we had that information in here too? Image, header, and forms. Oh, search is kind of a multi-component thing. And then focus visible was on the form on the checkout. And what if we just knew kind of what the problem was? What if we just had like a general abstraction of the problem, what the WCAG violation? Again, they like WCAG, you say success criteria because that's positive, and WCAG violation is a negative. But non-text content, that's alt attributes or subtitles. Focus visible, non-text content, non-text contrast. Gotta read carefully, and focus visible. Okay, cool. Now that we have like more data, we can kind of just maybe tally up these individual unique counts. We had 5 issues, but there's really only 5 issues across 4 pages. And it's 4 pages, but it's only 3 components. It's 3 components, but guess what? It's only 3 problems. That's much more digestible. Even 3 is better than 5. So, or 3 components or 4 pages. All of those numbers are better than 5 issues. We could start to kind of get dimensions on how our code works and the problems we have. But the problem with Excel we're running into is you can only really visualize one dimension at a time, like just sort by this. So I started wondering, could we leverage kind of more modern spreadsheeting applications like Notion or Airtable? And modern spreadsheet might sound like an oxymoron, but they do exist. They're really great. But mostly their power is in generating views, sort of like you do queries with JIRA or something like that. But you could generate views really quickly, and it's actually really kind of compelling information. Maybe we could, instead of staring at a JIRA or an Excel, we could maybe start to see our data in more colorful and vibrant ways. And that's what I started calling a multi-dimensional accessibility audit, because really I don't want to look at the problem flat, a chronological list. I want to look at it in different ways to figure out how to study or dissect the problem, how to eat the elephant. And I would share my clients' our board, but legal didn't approve that. So I'm going to use this thing from WordPress Campus. And back in 2018, WordPress was launching a new editor called the Gutenberg editor. That's kind of the flagship kind of editing blog post writing experience inside WordPress. There was a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt around the accessibility of that thing when it was coming out, and there was people had raised issues, and but WordPress was kind of like, well, we're just going to launch it, and so there's some problems there, or just a disconnect in between what the community wanted and what the WordPress automatic product wanted. That said, WordPress Campus, WP Campus said, we're just going to let's raise money. We're going to hire an accessibility professional, Tenon, who's a great company. I would recommend them, but to come through and fix or audit the new editor. And Tenon did a great job. They found 90 issues, I said before, on this one component, this one editor component, which is pretty sophisticated. So it's not absurd that there were 90 problems. But they handed this off, and they gave an executive summary, then a full summary that's 300 pages long, but it tells you how to fix everything. Or they handed that off, and then they have a CSV file that you could download. And so that's kind of where we're going to start here. What I did, step 1, import the data from your JIRA or whatever. You can import the data. You get a CSV. It looks like this. It's boring as heck. So let's just plop it into Notion and see sort of what happens. And immediately I'm already more, I'm 33% more relaxed. This is more chill. This is more my speed. This is what I want to look at on a day-to-day basis. So already I'm liking this. So, okay. But I'm seeing right away, I see some repetitive columns, one column just said gut. Let's get rid of that. Step 2, hide columns. This is maybe the most satisfying part. You see a column you don't need, you don't care about, just go through and hide it. I see or you can bulk hide things, just go through and toggle them off. The data's still there, it's just hidden from the view. There's things like the description. I don't need the description in a spreadsheet. Why would you do that? Or the code, recommended code? No, let's get rid of that. You want to tailor this to what you need to make an informed decision. You don't want descriptions in a spreadsheet ever. So that's just period, stop, hard stop. So, but already now I see this data, and I see these columns, this warning and bug column kind of looks like it could be something where that data is very similar, or maybe, and then this column where it's components. It looks like a repeating column, or a multiple column, multi-component kind of situations like the header forms. So let's go through and convert our issues or our columns to selects and multi-selects. Okay, pretty simple process. You go through, you click the header, Yeah, just kind of look at the data, but just, go through, look at the header and click select. All right. And now when you click on those, they'll act like a select box, or if you add to it. And now these components, we'll go through and we'll turn this into a multi-select. And then you take this and you copy paste it over here. This is maybe the most manual process of the whole thing. And, maybe you can merge this in the Excel level, or maybe one day there will be a merge function in Notion or something like that. But either way, this is sort of what the process looks like. And then you go through and you hide the columns you don't need. I deleted them because I moved all the data. But if you want to keep the data clean, you could keep it, but I just deleted it. And I did this a lot for like the platforms and the WCAG success criteria. I kind of went through and I made this board, kind of merged it all down as concise as possible. Step 4, color code. You gotta be fancy. Whatever. It's 2020. We gotta just color this. You gotta look good while you're doing it. So, warnings are yellow because of, I guess, soccer or something, and bugs are red, or they could be green, or they could be emoji. They could be whatever you want to do to, like, whatever flavors you want to put in here. You should do it. Like, I absolutely implore you to do that. But I went through and the WCAG success criteria, I color coded that. Why? Well, the major numbers of the violations of the success criteria, are mapped to like the type of error, either perceivable, operable, understandable, or robustness error. And I was like, I would just want to visualize that. So that's what I did. I went through and I added those so that I could visualize it. And step 5, add counts, right? Kind of go through, add counts to the issues. We started off with 90 issues. That's a lot. But you get into the components. Well, hey, look, that's only 16 components. That's really not that much, right? Or if you go in and I think it gets down to the WCAG criteria. I think that here it's coming up here, but the WCAG criteria, there's only 26. Well, that's much different than 90 issues. There's only 26 problems sprinkled through 16 components. There's not 90 problems. It's 26 problems sprinkled through 16 components, and there's probably some subtasks or what. However you want to think about it. But now I start seeing new dimensions to look at the data. So that's where these tools really shine, is step 6, creating these new dimensions in order to show off these tools. So like you can go through and let's just look at one, the title block. All the errors for the title block, we'll create a list. It should be easy enough. We'll just add a filter where component equals title block, done. You can sort those however you want. There's this whole sort tree. But let's do another one where we group by component. Let's see all the components all together. Why not? Because we can use a Kanban. It doesn't have to be like beginning, middle, end. It can be just a list of things in a group, a tag of some kind. Look at this. And now we could just pick one up and do that, just work top to bottom through one single component, because that's how we build our sites. Or group by violation. Let's see what it looks like when we group everything by the violation that occurred. Maybe we see something different. Oh, we did it wrong, sorry, but these tools are really forgiving, so we can just switch it back to a board. It's pretty easy. So we'll go back to success criteria. Wow, look, and they're all color-coded because I did that. And maybe I need to see more data here. I don't want just the title. I want to see a little bit more data. I can customize it, which is like a problem I was having in JIRA. And then group by platform. Well, let's look at the assistive technologies we're dealing with. And again, these are going to be color-coded for all. These are all the Windows things. Ooh, Windows high contrast. I love that one. Those would be fun to fix, but then there's Mac and VoiceOver. I'm a Windows user, so I don't even have a Mac here, so I would have to offload that to somebody else. But this is my favorite, group by population. This is where the magic really comes in. Knowing the population that's affected by the issue. Look at this. We now know who our application is actively discriminating against. Isn't that powerful? Does your organization know who you're actively discriminating against? Probably not. But now we can shape the data in a way that we actually do know this. And actually, cognitively impaired people is the number one. But, and I would say this, cognitive impairment is hard for me to understand. I don't understand the limits of it perfectly, but that's okay. I'm learning and I have an open growth mindset about it, but I don't understand it completely. But I also know those issues tend to be a little more difficult to fix because usually it's a UI problem or like you got too clever, or you have a button that opens a drop down that opens something that changes something up above it or something like that. So you have like an accessibility, like an understanding problem, a cognitive problem that you're facing. It usually requires a redesign of some kind. Again, like, cool to know. Like, we're starting to understand the amount of work it's going to take to get out from under this. So wrapping up, like, I just want to recap this whole little bit. We started with this, right? And we ended up with this. And it has all of our little groupings. We can visualize the data however we want. We can color code the data however we want. We can show and hide any property we want. We can organize it, rearrange the property in whatever order we want. We have total control of the data and the visualization and the dimensions that we can build here. And we took that data, just one example of the total control. We started out with 38 columns and we ended up with 10. That's better, right? Like, less information, less cognitive overload. You don't have the descriptions just in the middle of a spreadsheet anymore. How did this work out for us? I think that's a really important thing to discuss. We closed about 46% of the issues. And again, the number one thing was we weren't able to reproduce. There were issues in the backlog that didn't even apply, pages that had been disappeared or redesigned since the issues were created. That's another problem with backlogs. Issues that stay around, they're often out of date. 19 issues were contrast related. That ended up being a problem with the color sampling tool on the Macintosh computer that the accessibility team was using. 15 issues were for the promo code form, which showed up on every page. That, again, a repeatability problem that we fixed it once, like a simple 3-line code fix, and it fixed it on 15 pages. Another 15 more issues where we had a duplicate icon on the page and it was flagging a duplicate ID issue. We removed the icon, fixed the issue. This is it. And 12 issues were alt attributes. It's pretty simple. When you start to understand the problem and group them all together, you're able to make better, more informed decisions and more precise fixes. So I want to wrap up here kind of with just a section on the thoughts of improving this workplace satisfaction, because I do think it's a deal. I think backlogs have an emotional toll, on the developer. Even the company as a whole, it's like an emotional weight sitting around there, and they don't have to be, but I think they do possess that. And part of it is because, kind of going back to the Agile Manifesto, we need to value individuals and interactions over process and tools. We need to value individuals and what they care about. But sometimes we get stuck in a way where we're just trying to get through the sprint. They're trying to get through the tool and the process. We're trying to just kind of just bear down and get through using the process and the tools. But we should be thinking about the individuals. Daniel Pink, an author, self-helpy kind of author, writes about there's 3 things you need to feel meaning. And this is echoed in The Happiness Advantage and a couple other kind of businessy books. But 3 things you need to feel meaning is autonomy, like taking on what interests you. And in theory, that's what the Agile movement was about. But, in reality, you just get handed a 313 long list of issues. Mastery, feeling of getting better. And, if I had worked through all 300 issues, I guess I should have mentioned I ended up having to be pulled off the project. But a mastery, if you had 300 issues, you'd feel better at the end. And I did feel better after 146. And you'd also have purpose. Purpose is a third thing you need. And purpose is doing something bigger than ourselves. And accessibility has that built in. So that's like really good. But if you're doing it, but nobody cares about it in the organization, it becomes meaningless, right? And so that sort of undoes all the goodwill that's in there. So you might be thinking, okay, the conclusion you're coming to, no backlogs. That's it. That's the solution. We're going to delete it today. Maybe that's for you. But I would honestly say, like, I think before we get to no backlogs, we need to get to no log jams, right? Like, that's where we want to get to, where people, the burden doesn't just fall on one person, or we're not generating too much work for the machine. And I think I have some tips to help undo these log jams and help you not get there in the first place. Tip 1, avoid an extensive audit, right? Don't do A to Z auditing. Start with a few core templates first, because like we said, a problem here is going to show up on the next 5 pages. They are very, because of how we build our sites, it's very repetitive. So you're going to repeat work if you just over audit. And I think about often like what Jerry McGovern calls the top tasks. These are things like, your user has to add something to cart, or they have to check out, the checkout flow, they have to sign up. These are tasks, common tasks, or core tasks to your product. You need maybe take one of those at a time and try to solve those. And chances are, if you fix something in that, that fix will cascade into other components and pages. And if it doesn't, because you don't have high code reuse in your project, that's fine. But at least you have a documented fix somewhere in your Git history. You'll have a fix somewhere. And it's important to remember, accessibility, like, design systems, are compounding investment. Like, you make one fix and it'll slowly cascade and make everything better. Tip number 2 is kind of similar to this idea of focus on one flow at a time. Deliver small issues in small packs. And I quite literally mean like a backpack of issues, like something one person can carry and do by themselves over a short period of time. Think about issues in that context, not in the just larger picture. What can one person do? Because people need to keep morale high and employee turnover low. And if you overload the workers, they're going to peace out. And that's really expensive to find a new developer. Have you ever met somebody with a desktop like this? Oh, it gives me, this hurts me. It'd be much better if it looked like this. If your backlog was more like this. Fixing alt attributes. Oh, that's a small pack of issues. Oh, fixing focus states. That's a small pack of issues. Achievable tasks can trigger like psychological rewards too. If it's a small enough pack and achievable enough, boom. Hey, I fixed that. I cleared out that folder. I deleted it forever. That's great. And maybe you can identify where specialists might be needed. Oh, Sally does modals. We can ask Sally if she wants to pick these issues up. I think one example I always think about is Legos, right? Like when I was a kid, you'd open the box and pull out the bag and open the bag, and 500 Legos would shoot out on the floor and get stuck in the carpet, right? But nowadays, when my son opens a box of Legos, or myself, let's be honest, but opens a box of Legos, there's a bag, but inside that bag are smaller bags. And these smaller bags are numbered based on where you are in the process. They're progressive bags of things. And that leads me kind of to my next point, is to gamify the experience, make it progressively increase the difficulty, or structure them in a way where the learning gets more and more. And I don't mean like give people badges for finishing accessibility issues. Maybe you could do that. But what I mean more is like Mario, Super Mario Land for the Game Boy here, but any Mario. But the first world is always just about running, right, jumping, and then you learn to jump and hit things like a box, and then you learn to jump on enemies, and then the box gives you items, and you learn about items. The first world is always just very easy and very educational. And then the second world starts to get a little more tough, and it introduces new enemies and new items. And then the end worlds, the later worlds, is where all your skills have to come together. And maybe new things still show up, but you're using your prior skills to finish the game. And I think accessibility can be like this. You can pack in increasing difficulty, or even increase the level of collaboration. Like contrast issues, we know that usually involves designers and developers. Or focus issues, it involves designers and developers. You got to think about that stuff. And like delivering them in small enough bits and packs and increasing difficulty can spread knowledge throughout an organization way better than one person doing all 313 issues. You can tag issues in your repo with like the good first issue hashtag or whatever, like just low hanging fruit. But I think ultimately, like where it matters most is you have to care about accessibility. There's no replacement for caring. And if your organization cares about accessibility, just like security, just like performance, if you care about this, or user experience, if you care about this stuff, then it'll be built into your products. But if you don't care, you have to shoehorn it in. And that's a much, much, much more painful process. So hopefully this helps you get on to your future of no log jams. I'm going to finish my talk here, but before I go, I just want to say thank you to two people, Yang Huang, who helped me work through this. He was working with me, and we're kind of doing, I don't know, a little bit of guinea pig testing, but trying to figure it all out. And he worked on this and helped me out through things. And then Christopher Schmidt, my friend who passed away earlier this year. Christopher always was supportive of me and what I was doing and interested in what I was working on, but he gave me some really excellent feedback. One of our last conversations gave me excellent feedback on these multi-dimensional audit stuff from his accessibility auditor perspective and using his kind of his wealth of knowledge. So thank you, Christopher. Thank you, Jan. I really appreciate that. So thank you. I'm Davidtron 5000 on Twitter and GitHub, DAVA. So if you want to connect there, that's great. But thank you and good luck and have fun.